Okay, so that last hour of lab was pretty interesting, and so I wanted to go back and check a couple of things. First, yeah, make sure I talked about logistics. Make sure, especially if you're on the PC, make sure you're using the right card. Make sure that you update your drivers. When I updated my drivers, I saw a difference in After Effects. Even the startup screen changed slightly. Um, and then I wanted to update this Illustrator file just in case it was a little dated in a composition, and you want to edit the layers. It will launch Illustrator and allow you to do that. But for the most part, editing in place, editing text in place, works with seamlessly with Photoshop. So what I would probably do is take this AI and convert it to a Photoshop file if I wanted to edit it in place in After Effects. That's something to keep in mind. So I'll send you text too, just so it's in the latest version of Illustrator. This one is in an older version. And I'm just going to demonstrate what I wanted to show you in the lab instead of trying to go step by step through the authors from memory, and that kind of slowed me down too. But let's go ahead and I'll go and minimize this, and I'm going to launch After Effects. And what I'm going to do is, since the graphics processor is set as the default, and this is only on the PC, you don't have to worry about it on the Mac. I'll just go ahead and run as administrator. So that way I know that I have all the resources and everything in After Effects. And so what we're going to do is something similar to what the author has done, but basically I want to show you a minimum of what I want to see when you turn in the lab. And it will take some time. Again, it's booting up now, and it takes a little bit of time to boot up depending on your machine. So it booted up, and as I told you, I don't know if you'll recall, but if you look at the home screen, it looks a little bit different than what I showed you tonight. One thing that was missing are the recent files, and I have a lot of files, and it didn't welcome me back as Curtis, and the start tutorial didn't show. I would recommend that you take a look at what's new. I'm going to look at that a little bit later. But I don't need the home screen. I'm going to start the project, and hopefully everything will work the way that I wanted it to. And so we reviewed the user interface, and I think you feel comfortable with that. What I want to do is to work with those files that I have, similar to what was done in the book. That I can do a little bit easier if it's just my own stuff. So I'm going to import multiple files. The first thing I'll do is import the Jet movie and the JPEG file, lady_terminal medium, because that's set basically the same resolution as the video. And I want to import these two as footage and select import, and so now they're in the project pane. And After Effects just opened back up to the import multiple files, and I'm done with that for right now. And we can see that now I have the footage here. If I double click it, I can go ahead and preview it, and I can play it. Okay, so what I want to start doing is building the compositions, and so we'll select both of these, we'll drag them to the timeline, and After Effects will ask me, and I'm going to go a little bit fast, what composition I want to use for the dimensions, and it sets the timeline to the still duration, and I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. And we know from what we did in lab that the reason we can't see the lady in the terminal right now is that we have to drag her up above the jet. Now, see, we can see that the duration of the JPEG is 7 seconds. Now it's a JPEG, so we could extend it if we want. We could drag it out to about 8 seconds. And so I have the playhead on 5 seconds. It's a good idea to kind of put it where you want it. And then I can drag and I can set this thing right to the exact duration. So I want it to be about 8 seconds. We're going to set the whole video to be, let's say, about 12 seconds from start to finish. So the last thing we want to do is import that Illustrator file, right? So we'll select File, and just so that I don't cause confusion, we're not going to edit it, but we are still going to bring it in as a composition, and we'll import it. And what I want to do now, since we see it's a composition, I want to rename it. So I'll go ahead and rename it here, and let's just call it Jet Away Text. And it helps to name your layers so that they make sense, because we know this is the main composition right now, which is Jet, and this is the Jet Away Text. And so I want to bring this now onto the timeline and place it just above the lady terminal JPEG. And what we see here is that the Jet Away Text, its full duration is about 10 seconds, right? And so, you know, that makes sense that, you know, like I said, I wanted to run it for like 12 or so seconds. So why don't we go ahead and we'll put this thing at, so it's about 9:24, right, or so. So let's go ahead and we'll increase the duration of the JPEG right up to the same point, essentially. Because what we want to do is, I want to fade the text out by adjusting its transparency and setting some keyframes. And then I want the video to play. So right now, this is kind of what we have. And we can see that as it plays, the image and the text are above it. I'll go ahead and select the text, and I want to drag it right about here, because sitting in this location I get the best contrast. And all we're going to do is, we want that text, we're going to have the text move across the screen and fade away over about 10 seconds, as well as have the photo fade away. So let's work with the text first. The first thing I want to do is adjust the transparency over 10 seconds. Make sure that if you haven't done it already, that you press the home key so your playhead is at 00, or you can type 00 if you move the playhead. So if I take playhead and put it here, and then I click in here and I type and just delete all this, and then just type 000, it's going to move it back to the start of the animation. I want to press T so that I can adjust the opacity or transparency over the 10 seconds. Now, it's really important that you do this in a specific order when you're working with keyframes, because remember, a keyframe means change, right? So I'm at 00 and the opacity is at 100%. So it's fully visible. And if I set a keyframe by clicking on the clock, we can see that it shows us that we have a keyframe. We can add or remove a keyframe using this button. We don't want to remove it. We can also see on the timeline that the keyframe is set. So the first step is to set the keyframe at the beginning frame, and then set the next keyframe at the ending frame. So, and where that change should occur. And so now I'm going to scrub right over to about roughly 10 seconds or so, right? and I'm going to change the transparency, and it's going to happen fast. As soon as I scrub it down, you're going to see the keyframe appear right here on the timeline. And so I took it all the way to 0, and there's a little bit of rendering going on. Sometimes you have to wait for that. And that can look confusing too when we're working and I'm trying to do demos because I'm waiting for it to render. But you can see that as I scrub, it becomes completely transparent. Alright, the next thing I want to do is do the same thing with the JPEG. And so I'll go ahead and collapse it, and I'll lock this layer. I'm going to lock this and go to the lady JPEG. I'll expand her, and what I want is, right now, I want to, I can go ahead and just show default and change the opacity. I've got it set back at 0, right? I'll set the opacity now, leave it at 100%, right? And then move out to about 10 seconds. And then I'll go back and I'll change it to 0. And so now, if I go back to home and I scrub, then I'll see that they both fade out about the same time, right? And then we see the jet video. And so everything seems to work there. There's only one other thing that we want to do, and I want to introduce you to animating the text layer using a motion path. Now next week we'll look at animating with presets and effects. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to animate that text ourselves. Okay? And so I've got it locked, so it would help to unlock it, and I'll go ahead and select it. And what I'm going to do is press P for position so I don't have to see everything. And right now we can see in X and Y coordinates where it's sitting, right? And so what I want to do is I want to have that text animate across the screen as it fades out. So the first thing I'll do is I'll set a keyframe here at the start. And so now I have that keyframe. And then I'll move the playhead to 10 seconds. And see, now it's hard to see it because the text literally disappears, doesn't it? But we can see the marker here. And then what I will do is, and this is pretty tricky, you have to make sure you have that center handle. And I want to just create a straight motion path. So drag it a little and then hold the shift key. And what will happen is you'll get a straight path. Now that wasn't exactly what I wanted, so I'm going to undo. And I'm going to hold the shift key down, and you know, again, it's so picky and finicky. Now I got it, and I drag it across, and it wrote the keyframe, and that'll happen over about 10 seconds. So now I really get some motion. This text seems to speed up a little bit. You know, I'm not easing it out or anything, but it's tracking across the screen. What we'll see later is that we could actually do things like mess with the anchor points in the motion path, and we can change the path, etc. But for now, we'll just keep it very linear, and it fades away as it gets to the end of the 10 seconds. So I said about 12 seconds, so then people can see the beautiful sky, right? All right, let's take it out to about 14. So if I preview, we can see it. I want to make sure that I go back to home, and what I'll do now is I'll select composition and go to composition settings. So I change the time on the and the duration of the whole composition, the main composition. Let's go ahead and we'll set that to 1400. That should give us 14 seconds. And you see how it just trimmed the timeline for us nicely, and it's set. And I wanted to demonstrate that later. Now, one thing I haven't done is save the project, which is almost suicidal. You should save at a regular points. So all I want from you this week is that you save the composition You zip it up and you give me the assets. In the reading, he talks about how to publish it, and you can go ahead and publish it if you like. It's up to you. But I'm going to go ahead and select File, and then Save it. And that's one of the artifacts from the last thing. So I'll just go ahead and save it again. And it's there. Okay. And so that's kind of what I really wanted to demo. I'll probably stick to my own demos because they're a little bit shorter, and I'll give them to you in video, and then we'll go over them in class and any of the questions. All right, it's been a long night. I appreciate your help. Have a good one, and I'll see you next week.